the experience for all of you. First, as you'll see, we will be recording this event. So we wanted to make sure that you're aware of this when you're entering information into chat. Second, we wanted to ask you to share your questions in chat. We will take those from the chat and relay them to the speakers at the end of our session. So we very much welcome any questions you might have for the speakers. You also should note that you may want to put your Zoom into the speaker view rather than the gallery view, as this will optimize the experience for you as the viewer. With that, I am very, very pleased to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Rose Rwabuhihi, who's the Chief Gender Monitor and the head of the Rwandan Gender Monitoring Office. She currently serves at the Gender Monitoring Office, which is a government institution entrusted to contribute towards advancing gender accountability at all levels and across all sectors. And in addition, she's worked for more than 15 years with the UN and several countries in Africa and the US, an extensive working experience with government institutions, research institutions, and NGOs. Her main focus of her work has been to promote accountability for gender equality, women's rights and development, and a specific focus on governance, peace, security, and violence against women. So these topics could not be more pertinent today, and I would love to hand over the floor to her to say some introductory remarks about the challenges and opportunities for women's entrepreneurship and economic empowerment in this time of great change and challenges. Thank you very much, and over to you, Rose.
Thank you so much, moderator, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Let me first thank the organizers of this side event and express my pleasure to be part of this so important discussion. Indeed, the theme of this gathering speaks pretty well to one of the common issues that affect women all over the world. Negative effects of gender stereotypes are far-reaching and contribute to delaying change, especially regarding innovative strategies put in place by different countries to promote women's entrepreneurship and economic empowerment. It has been documented that stereotyping restricts women's access to information, networks, jobs, and assets. They justify a gendered occupational segregation that often assigns women to jobs, tasks, and roles that are deemed less important, of course, less paying. A recent World Bank report on women business and law showed that 78 countries out of 190 surveyed still maintain legal barriers that prevent women's full economic participation, and 95 countries do not guarantee equal pay for work of equal value. We have all observed around us that till today, companies tend to be managed by men, where only about 19% have a female manager. In addition, women bear a disproportionate burden of unpaid care work, reducing their ability to engage in income-generating activities and prevent them to take advantage of national, regional, and global entrepreneurship opportunities. These existing restrictions and gender inequalities, they have been aggravated by COVID-19 pandemic that has set back the already achieved gender gains and women's economic empowerment, especially those in fragile sectors such as the cross-border trade, hospitality, and tourism. For instance, during the first months of COVID-19 pandemic, informal workers globally lost an average of 60% of their income. In order to address the impact of gender stereotypes, Africa region has put in place policy instruments and mechanisms to support entrepreneurship and women's economic empowerment. To give some example, Africa has put in place an affirmative finance action for women in Africa. It is called AFAWA in brief. And it is an opportunity that provides advisory services to financial institutions and strengthens the capacity of women entrepreneurs through training to enhance business productivity and bridge the financing gap faced by women in Africa. This is an opportunity to work closely, which could leverage women entrepreneurship. This is very important and very key, and we expect a lot from this initiative. Another initiative that has been put in place in Africa is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is another unprecedented market opportunity for goods and services across the African continent. And we hope that women entrepreneurs will have an opportunity to take advantage of this market. The FCTA, or the African Continental Free Trade Area, will provide opportunities where larger firms will use smaller or women-owned businesses as suppliers. This is new, this is unprecedented, and this is something that we have to watch very closely. In that same framework, another measure that's going to bring a very important impact, the deduction of tariffs at borders. This will provide an opportunity for especially informal traders to operate through formal channels that address the vulnerability of women in cross-border trade, including gender-based violence, confiscation of goods, and sometimes sexual violence. The whole Africa and women in Africa are looking at those initiatives and many others and expecting a lot of returns in terms of promoting women's economic empowerment. Now, for Rwanda, negative gender norms and stereotypes have been one of the causes of women's low performance in the business sector. The government and the private sector have put in place a private sector. It is a platform and find solutions to business challenges, including those related to gender equality. And in line with this, gender responsive legal and policy framework has been put in place, and these include some measures related to property and financial inclusion. One of the results is a landmark progress in women's ownership of traditionally male-reserved resources like land. Land is critical in this nation. Access to land facilitated women to use it as collateral to access financial loans. Actually, we have seen an increase of women's access to loans due to the fact that they own land and can use it as collateral. We have known some good practices in Rwanda, and we have been able to share through the region and in international forums. And many countries have visited Rwanda for experience sharing, which also provided to the country an opportunity to learn what is happening in Africa and beyond. I will not forget to mention the internet connectivity that has been expanded in Rwanda and is a very key drive of change for women's access to business, as it has brought closer services, information that women need for businesses. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by a call. Allow me to highlight that mitigating gender stereotypes need efforts, joint efforts of all, at all levels. First, strong partnership between the public institution, the private sector, and the development partners. We should jointly challenge the gender stereotypes at all levels and ensure that COVID-19 recovery mechanisms are gender responsive. It is imperative to support women to build their skills and embrace opportunities afforded by fields traditionally male-dominated. In some countries, like my country, Rwanda, where we are still at the reconstruction in many sectors, it is very important that women are prepared to take over the opportunities offered in those sectors. And the last but not least, we have to invest in innovation to support women graduate from informal and formal business to formal businesses and embrace digital economy. We have had that experience in Rwanda, and we saw the change it brought, especially at the rural level, through mobile phones, using transactions, e-connectivity, e-commerce. It has been something that has been a real revolution for women, especially in rural areas. Those are some of the points I want to share, and I hope that this discussion is going to shed more light on stereotypes and how we can address them. I thank you so much, organizer. This is an excellent platform to share and learn. Thank you so much.
Rose, thank you so much for your comments. And for me, the experience of Rwanda is quite inspiring and interesting. I was in Rwanda right before COVID happened, and seeing some of the progress you noted in terms of financial access to technology, land, and representation in government is really was really quite impressive. So very happy to get those comments, and also your call to action, which I do hope, as we get into the Q&A, we'll be sure to circle back on some of those. Let me now move to Sarah Kitakule, who will be speaking on behalf of the Cherie Blair Foundation for Women, where she is a trustee. She's also a private sector development specialist with 25 years experience as an advocate for women's economic empowerment and gender equality, having worked with organizations such as the World Bank, IFC, USAID, and ILO. And she's currently an independent consultant specializing in private sector development and gender and women's empowerment. She's also the founder and director of the Kitakule Foundation, a charity which promotes equal access to education, and has been a board member of many women's networks, and was the elected chairperson of the Ugandan Women Entrepreneurs Association for 3 years. Let me pass the mic over to Sarah. Very much welcome, and look forward to hearing your comments on the good work that the Cherie Blair Foundation has done in research on this topic, and what exactly we're grappling with when we talk about gender stereotypes. So Sarah, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wendy, for that excellent introduction. Yeah, so excellencies and distinguished guests, as you heard from Wendy, my name is Sarah Kitakule, and I'm a board member of Cherie Blair Foundation for Women. I'm a board member because I'm passionate, but I'm also desperate for this women economic empowerment to happen during my lifetime. I welcome you all on behalf of the Cherie Blair Foundation, and I'm sure we are going to have fantastic discussions this afternoon and this morning. I would like to start by giving special thanks to the Permanent Mission of Rwanda, to the UN for hosting this event together with the foundation. We are grateful for your partnership and determination to tackle gender stereotypes that undermine women's economic empowerment. I mean, you've heard exactly what Rwanda is doing, and I must specify I've been to Rwanda, and I know that a lot is happening and change is happening. I would also like to thank the Permanent Mission of Sweden to the UN and the Permanent Mission of the Philippines to the UN for co-sponsoring this important event, and all the speakers who have availed their time and expertise to join us today. progress towards economic gender justice has been painfully slow. I mean, all of you here, I mean, I've been seeing a number of people. We've been around for ages and we are talking about the same thing. We meet in the same meetings. We meet on the same continents. We meet in the CSW every year and we're talking about the same thing. Why is progress so slow? And I mean, it is estimated that it takes 268 years to close the economic gender gap. All of us on this platform will long be gone. How great it would be for us to be able to see the change in our lifetime, because we've been fighting for emancipation, for equality for quite a while. I'm sure no one in this room is willing to wait that long. It's time to move up a gear to accelerate progress towards gender equality. And I think we all want to stand up and be counted. And we want all to say, yes, I was there when this happened. And I think it can happen. It can happen if we all committed to it. And a key part of the solution is tackling gender stereotypes. These are generalized views about the characteristics or roles that are expected to be possessed or performed by women and men. At the Cherie Blair Foundation for Women, we work with women entrepreneurs in low and middle income countries to eliminate the global gender gap in entrepreneurship. And we do this by providing training, mentoring, and networking opportunities. I mean, we recently won an award for our mentoring program. So if you are not part of that, you're really welcome to join us. And through advocacy, seeking to influence the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And since the establishment of the foundation in 2008, we have provided support to over 200,000 women entrepreneurs in over 100 countries. But of course, that's just a drop in the ocean. We would love to support many more women if we could only get more partners on board. And across this time, many women entrepreneurs and our partners have spoken of the gender stereotypes they face when trying to start, sustain, and grow their businesses. And so this is a new focus in our work. My story of the gender stereotypes and how they affected my ability to start and grow my business, I mean, it will be subject to another webinar. I mean, it's quite long. And I'm sure many of you have gone through the same experience. This is why I will talk today about how gender stereotypes affect women entrepreneurship in low and middle income countries, and how we need to work together to shift these deeply entrenched limitations if we are to achieve economic equality. And as Wendy mentioned in the beginning, if we are to remove the bias in line with this year's theme. Women face significant economic, social, and legal barriers to setting up and running their own businesses. As already mentioned, I think it was mentioned in the presentation of the earlier presenter, 155 countries have at least one law that limits women's economic opportunities. Globally, only 1 in 3 businesses are owned by women. And in low-income countries, only 1 in 4 businesses have any women's owners. I mean, this is ridiculous and needs to change. I mean, how in 2022, in some countries, you have to get permission of your husband to open a bank account. I mean, this is 2022. Why should this be happening? And in many countries, women are actually more in population, more than men, but yet, you know, they are running less numbers of businesses. And yet for many of them, it's the only choice for them to survive. I think we need to increase these numbers. Gender-based discrimination and bias expressed through gender stereotypes are a root cause. For example, they give rise to and perpetuate the unequal domestic labor burden, limited access to finance, markets, and networks, and perpetuation of falsehoods around who is and isn't capable of running a successful business. And this, of course, then prompted us to be able to collect some evidence around gender stereotyping. And the new research conducted by the foundation sought to explore in detail women entrepreneurs' lived experiences of gender stereotypes. The data from women entrepreneurs across 40 countries showed, unsurprisingly, that gender stereotypes affects more women entrepreneurs, both in their personal lives and as business owners. Overall, we see clear patterns that gender stereotypes start early, shape women's journeys to and through entrepreneurship, and can have a lasting impact on aspirations, confidence, and behavior, and critically, the wider entrepreneurial ecosystem in which they seek to sustain and grow businesses. I mean, we all grow up when they are telling us women have to kneel, they have to be meek, they have to be silent. I mean, all this affects our confidence to even face bank managers. Those are typical gender stereotypes. And women confirmed that gender stereotypes intersect with other kinds of stereotypes based on factors including age, social class, and ethnicity to compound disadvantage for many. So what were the findings? We can only highlight a number. Almost all the women had experienced gender stereotypes and from a young age, most commonly from family, the media, and in education. It always starts with us in our homes. Examine yourself. A third said gender stereotypes experienced in childhood made them feel they wouldn't be able to run a business on their own. And half the women say that whilst running their businesses, their family or friends have told them to focus more on family or children. How many times do people tell you, you should forget about that, just go find a husband and get married? You know, this is gender stereotyping. 70% of our respondents say that gender stereotypes have negatively affected their work as entrepreneurs. Nearly half of them felt that women don't have equal opportunities as entrepreneurs in their country. This is across 40 countries. Over half felt that institutions relevant for entrepreneurs in their country are biased in favor of men. And almost 2/3 believe that gender stereotypes affect how seriously they are taken as business owners. Over half found that financial institutions were biased in favor of men, with a quarter reporting discriminatory remarks on the grounds of gender whilst trying to access finance. And you'll be surprised that some of these comments are by their fellow women, not necessarily only men. Understandably, gender stereotypes undermine women's confidence. A third say that they struggled to believe in themselves and their ability to run a successful business due to gender stereotypes. Now, tackling gender stereotypes is a critical issue of women's rights and gender justice, is recognized by the international community with the adoption of Article 5 and 10 of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, as we normally call it, focusing on the elimination of gender stereotypes. 189 countries have ratified CEDAW, yet we find that over 100 still have these laws on the books. But sadly, we would not be here today if that meant this issue was being fully recognized, in spite of our heads of state and everybody signing. Gender stereotypes mean that millions of women are excluded from their right to financial independence and to participate in their economies as business owners. As a result, they are denied access to the resources that would enable them to bring health and education to their children and add value to their communities. The world is losing the solutions, innovation, and positive impact that women's businesses could actually bring. And after our research, we have made some recommendations, and I hope that we can collectively move this forward. So what should be done? How can the UN Commission on the Status of Women and its multiple constituents strengthen the work to tackle gender stereotypes? At the foundation, we have detailed and wide-ranging initial recommendations, and I would like to encourage you to view these in our report on our website. For today, I make 3 important calls for action. Number 1, the work must start in our personal lives. We all have work to do. It may look simple, but everything starts with us. As a mother, it starts with you. How do you treat your daughter compared to your son? As a manager in the office, it starts with you. How do you look at a female employee versus a male employee? We must increase self-awareness of our own biases and intersecting gender stereotypes and how these influence our actions and decisions. Number two, in our varied roles as officials, employees, decision makers, leaders, and influencers, we should seek to better understand and raise awareness of how social norms and gender stereotypes shape girls' and women's lives and undermine women's economic empowerment and women entrepreneurs' opportunities. Specifically, we must not mistakenly take for granted that this problem is recognized and understood by everyone with a stake in the solution. Many in government don't understand. Sometimes you have to explain to them and then they will get a light bulb moment and say, I had never thought about it that way. It was encouraging to see that the global theme of International Women's Day this year was break the bias, but we need ongoing campaigns throughout the year and across years, unremitting pressure towards change in order for us not to wait for the 268 years. And number three, to a meeting here at CSW today, the UN Commission on the Status of Women should be leading the effort to tackle gender stereotypes from the front. We must use this CSW to recognize how gender stereotypes undermine women's rights, including economic rights, and embed strong calls for action in the agreed conclusions of the 66th session. I would like to conclude by saying, breaking down gender stereotypes, attitudes, and ultimately transforming the patriarchal structures of our economic and political systems will be an enormous change. It is vital, therefore, that we collectively ensure long-term commitment is one of the keys to achieving economic justice. And we hope you all join us in this work to tackle gender stereotypes. Do not get tired. Keep knocking at those doors. Go through the window if you have to. Make sure that you are present at the table whenever it's being discussed until we are heard and until we can bring about the change that we need to see, especially for the many women who are living in poverty simply because of the gender stereotypes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah Kitakule, for those very inspiring remarks, call to action, and for that clear sense of urgency around moving forward on these issues as quickly as possible. And to the Cherie Blair Foundation for doing the research that really tries to get at the bottom of what these gender stereotypes are and what they're doing, the impact that they're having on women in their day-to-day lives. I'd like to now pass it on to Ulrika Grandin, who represents the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She is the Deputy Director of the Feminist Foreign Policy team in the ministry, and she's had several positions within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, among other things dealing with EU matters and with development cooperation. She has also worked with Sweden's Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, and we're very much looking forward to her remarks talking about feminist foreign trade policy and the best practices that we can advocate for tackling gender stereotypes from the perspective of a country that is quite a good role model for us, but has been also a great advocate on these issues for many, many years. So thank you very much, Ulrika, over to you.
Thank you so much, Wendy, and thank you, Sarah, for such an inspiring speech. See if I can follow your lead here. I will speak a little bit about our Swedish experience. And Sweden has a feminist government and has a feminist foreign policy. And as a priority for our feminist foreign policy, we have women's economic empowerment and economic gender equality. This is because we see it so essential for gender equality to advance in the first place. For the Swedish welfare state, it has been essential to put women on the labor market, to make them more economically empowered. And this has also been facilitated by increased social protection, such as childcare, which I think is essential here. And of course, it's our firm belief that without economic empowerment, it's difficult to participate in society as a whole, as a political person or in society. It's difficult to live an abusive relationship. It's difficult to get your sexual and reproductive health and rights assured. So this is a fundamental issue for the Swedish government and for our feminist foreign policy. And as been said here, I mean, there have been some achievements on this area, even if we're far behind, as Sarah pointed out so eloquently. But still more countries are reforming discriminatory laws and granting equal opportunities for men and women in the labor market. There are advances in social protection systems and in the essential area of childcare. More women are being educated in general, but also in areas such as science and engineering and in business. We see more women in the senior management roles in society, in private companies. But of course, there's a lot of things to do. And that's why it's so important also that we have this discussion and learn from each other, best practices, etc. Sweden is also taking a great part in the UN Women Generation Equality Initiative. And as such, we are one of the co-leads of the Action Coalition for Economic Justice and Rights. And in that work, together with our partners and other leaders, we are prioritizing work against discriminatory laws as essential to advance in this area. We're also working on advancing social and economic reform for gender equality. Women's role in the labor market is another priority, as well as having a feminist trade policy, which is also something that we a couple of years ago launched. But I would like to start to talk a little bit about how I see that economic and social reform in society and gender stereotypes and social norms go hand in hand. I mean, to advance on the other and the first and the other, you really need to have role models. And in Sweden, when women were kind of getting into the labor market, they were seen as role models for other women. They were also seen as breadwinners. All of a sudden, the attitudes changed against women being one of the breadwinners in the family. And of course, to advance women's role in the labor market, that for Sweden was necessary in terms of economic means. This was a way of advancing Swedish economic growth and was necessary for our society, which is also something that we really, I mean, women's role on the labor market, gender equality, etc., is of course super important in itself. But also the argument of economic growth and societal growth is one that we really have to push for, I think, in certain areas. And when women were more active in the labor market, we needed more childcare. So that was a push for that. And then also parental leave. When both men and women were in the labor market, we needed to see that maybe we have to share the parental leave, which led to change in social norms on how we were viewing men as fathers and as part of the family. So I kind of see these two, of course, going hand in hand with role models, reforms, and that also changes stereotypes. And of course, stereotypes have to change in order to get reform, etc. But I really see a strong connection there. And two other points that I want to make is for the advancement, of course, on data, on gender disaggregated data and research. And that's why it's so important what all of you do here, because that was when it was proven that that women's role on the labor market strengthened our society. It was much easier to also get acceptance for this, and also in other areas. So really to have the analysis and the data there to not to be argued. It's not a question of always values, it's also a question of facts. And of course, the women's rights movement in Sweden has been strong and has been pushing and going forward on these issues. Now I want to turn a little bit to our feminist trade policy. And this was actually very much a case of looking at statistics. When we saw that women were not benefited by trade as much as men were, and we also saw that products that were aimed at men had lower tariffs and taxes than products for women. This was quite good arguments to see that trade policy was not benefiting women and men equally. Trade policy was not neutral. And that's when our government decided to have a feminist perspective on trade. And this is, of course, when we are working on it, is to get gender equality into trade policy agreements, to look at tariffs, to look at things like businesses and women as managers of businesses, and all these gender equality aspects of trade. And we also saw that it wasn't measured as much as other areas. So we really have to work more on the data in the trade sector. And to increase the number of women in trade in senior management positions and in boardroom and as entrepreneurs is, of course, a very important part of our feminist trade policy. And I know that our trade minister, who is also a woman, also is very, when it comes to venture capital in trade markets, it's apparently benefiting men much more than women, which is something we should look at more also. And the private sector and the multilateral companies are, of course, very important here to work together with. The other thing I wanted to also highlight here is the potential of green jobs and gender equality. There is great potential, I think, in what we call the green economy, and how women and men can get equal access to green and decent jobs. And it matters in a lot of ways. This concerns consumption patterns, access to economic and productive resources, as we were talking about before, but also information and technology, of course, the gender digital divide. And primary sectors in the green economy are expected to be in areas such as agriculture and forestry and energy. And given women's engagement and also dependency of these sectors globally, they could potentially benefit greatly for this transition if we do it rightly. And there are several interesting examples of this, for instance, in the renewable energy sector and also in ecotourism, etc. And the last point I wanted to make is also the importance of having a social dialogue on the workplace with the trade union representatives for women, and also to how they as union representatives and as women can benefit from a social dialogue, and to influence areas such as their pay, their rights, and also right to parental leave, etc. So in sum, I would say that gender equality is necessary for a modern welfare state. There's no questions about it. It's necessary for economic growth and for also sustainable and environmental transition into the new economy. So thank you all. And with that, I look forward to an interesting discussion forward. Thank you.
Ulrika, thank you so much for those great comments. You talked about the importance of role models and changing attitudes and approaches and pioneering new paths forward. And Sweden has really done that for so many other countries. So wanted to thank you there. And I think the work that you're doing, very concrete work on trade, green economy, and other things are examples of, again, setting a path forward and role modeling some of these important new pathways for breaking the bias and moving forward with gender equality. Let me move on now to Ms. Aileen Abiva, who is the president of the Women's Business Council of the Philippines. She's also the president and CEO of Felta Multimedia Incorporated, which introduces innovative instructional materials and educational devices for school technology. So such an important topic for all of us as we've moved into remote learning for COVID. They are the education solution provider for Intel, and they work with Microsoft Global Training. So really, in the middle of these questions around how do we move into these remote learning opportunities. She has received many awards from ASEAN, from Ernst & Young, from the United Nations, as an entrepreneur, as a marketing expert, and as an executive. She was also the World Robot Olympiad Ambassador, and I think that really speaks to the question of non-traditional gender roles as we think about technology. So I will hand it over to her to talk more about the work that's happening in the Philippines and gender stereotyping there. And I would note, I've always been quite impressed because the Philippines tends to be at the top of the list in terms of the percent of women who are entrepreneurs. And it's delightful to have her here to represent that dynamic sector in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy. And as we say in the Philippines, we say mabuhay, right? And I'd like just to introduce Women's Business Council. The Women's Business Council Philippines, also known as Women Biz PH, is a lead private sector partner of the government, particularly the Department of Trade and Industry and the Philippine Commission on Women, in advancing the women's agenda in the APEC and ASEAN region. It is a leading voice of women in commerce and provides a platform to discuss women's issues in business and possible government policies and solutions. Furthermore, it seeks to promote small and medium women-led and women-owned enterprises through networking and through the use of technology to help them grow and become sustainable, and bringing them closer to institutions where they can have access to market, to tools, finance, as well as guidance on business reengineering and change management. Despite the consensus of the importance of women's economic empowerment expressed through such agreements as the Beijing Platform for Action, it is very evident to note that no country has yet managed to eliminate the gap between the economic participation of women and men. Even countries with high empowerment scores generally perform better in the health, wellness, and well-being, educational attainment, and political empowerment of women than their economic participation and opportunities. But may I share with you a personal story as an example, coming from an upper middle income family in a developing country such as the Philippines. I am a third daughter of our family of 6 girls, including twin sisters and a brother who is the youngest. When I was born, the doctor phoned my father, who was traveling abroad. When the doctor said, "It's another girl," my father just put down the phone and continued his meeting with no excitement. However, when my brother was born and the doctor called and said, "It's a boy," my father brought out his cigar, which he bought during a business trip in Cuba. That is when stereotyping begins. Conscious and unconscious motives of having a son in the family race continue to bring greater joy. The role of a Filipino son, or more specifically, the role of a good Filipino son, is placed above all the other male roles. Sons are expected to grow up loyal to their parents, look after them, help younger siblings, and generally be unselfish. Other stereotyping may be guns and cars are bought for a boy, preferably blue, never pink. While growing up, if he cries, he will be told, "Don't cry like a girl." He perhaps learns to express his emotions as he thinks it is girlish to express them. Filipino boys are encouraged to act strong, to act brave, to be tough. Developing the right male interests like sports, taking care of the outside work, learning to ride, drive, and other manly skills to be encouraged as he grows up. Even during the current pandemic, boys and husbands are still not expected to do their share of household work, like cooking, serving, tutoring, or washing clothes. The question of balancing home and family may not arise for him, as it is assumed that his gender defines his primary role as breadwinner. In business, many gender-related barriers and biases have declined over the years in the Philippines, but gender stereotypes continue to create problems in the progress of women's careers in corporations. The availability of opportunities for the career progressions of women continue to negatively affected by gender stereotypes, which shape managerial behavior and occupational outlooks in the workplace and patriarchal expectations. Filipino women continue to experience high levels of pressure from their jobs, and they have been found to experience high levels of mental and emotional stress when they utilize interpersonally oriented leadership style in male-dominated industries. Being in a male-dominated industry in technology myself, I have experienced it firsthand. In the Philippines, there remains gender gaps, particularly in fastest growing and highest paid jobs of the future, like computer science, data analytics, engineering. As a woman entrepreneur, it is common belief in the business world that women are risk averse, but women are in fact not risk averse, but are actually embrace risk. Filipino women are seen as risk averse because they mitigate costs while undergoing risk. The Women and Entrepreneurship Report examined the state of small to medium enterprises or SMEs in the Philippines and the contribution that women-owned businesses make to the Philippine economy. The report found that there are around 900,000 registered enterprises in the Philippines in 2019. The report defines women's SMEs as business where over 51% of ownership is held by a woman or women, or where 20% of ownership is held by a woman or women, where a woman holds a major leadership position, either as a CEO, COO, or president, and where 30% of the board of directors is composed of women. Research has shown that women SMEs tend to employ more women than businesses run by men. Therefore, is that potentially increasing number of women entrepreneurs in the Philippines will have the added effect of increasing the rate of paid employment among women. Inclusion of women participation in workforce and in the economy promotes inclusive growth that is enabling, innovative, and job generating. Women economic participation play a vital role in recovery and nation building. I would like to share the best practices in the Philippines in tackling gender stereotypes in entrepreneurship and women's economic empowerment. The National Council for Children's Television is the sole government agency with a mandate to ensure media literacy education for the Filipino children, held a gender sensitivity training to create the right gender sensitive environment that leads to mutual respect regardless of gender. The University of the Philippines preschool gender responsive early childhood care development, evidence shows that concept of gender takes root in children between age of 3 and 7 to 7. In my business, I have established I Create Cafe Manila, a Lego education creativity center.
Marlene, we can't hear the video.
Gender responsive activities like robotics, animation, and coding that impacts cognitive development, language, social and emotional development, and critical thinking skills. The Women Rise Research Study and Women Strong Network ASEAN. The outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic has had an upsetting impact on women MSMEs in the Philippines. Women-led and women-owned enterprises make up 58% of the country's MSMEs. To better grasp the needs of Filipino women entrepreneurs, Women Biz PH conducted a Q1 of 2021 research and took a close look at Sunrise Industries and the factors for their success and challenges to progress, such as use of financial technology and the impact of national and local business environments. The 120 women MSMEs respondents of the Women Rise program became the founding members of the Women Strong Network ASEAN, who are being equipped with knowledge and skills on business continuity planning, webinar learning series, mentoring, and business matching. The I Am Woman, a gender responsive guide for business and corporate leaders. The Women Biz PH embarked on the two-pronged project in response to the UN Sustainable Goal number 5 on gender equality and women's empowerment. The project consisted of 6 weekly webinars, as we call it, which is women's seminars, sessions, and the publication of an ebook designed to aid companies in understanding women empowerment and gender diversity and inclusion. The Magna Carta of Women by the Philippine Commission on Women, or Republic Act 9710, is a law and comprehensive women's human rights law that seeks to eliminate discrimination against women by recognizing, protecting, fulfilling, and promoting the rights of Filipino women, especially those in the marginalized sectors. The Philippine Information Agency and Presidential Communications Operations Officer made an gender fair media guide dissemination to media practitioners, information officers, writers, journalists, and students to reinforce positive portrayal of women in news, radio, TV programs, movies, and advertisements. Examples of positive portrayal of women in the news are Aileen Diaz, who won the first Olympic gold medal for the Philippines for weightlifting, a sport dominated by men. Maria Ressa of Rappler, Filipino journalist who won the first Nobel laureate, and women expressing intent to run for political positions in the 2022 elections from president to party list representatives. The UN Women Philippines, the Department of Trade and Industry, Women's Business Council Philippines, and the Philippine Commission on Women, promoting and sustainable inclusive women MSMEs through women's empowerment principles awareness sessions. These webinars is in recognition that businesses have a stake in and a responsibility for gender equality and women's empowerment. When will CSW participants tackle this issue and move on? Women must have more equitable access to assets and services, infrastructure programs that should be designed to benefit the poor, both men and women. And employment opportunities must be improved while increasing recognition of women's past unpaid work. Innovative approaches and partnerships include increased dialogue among development actors, improved coordination among donors, and support for women organizations at the national and global level.
Absolutely.
It is very evident to note that even in political scenarios, women representation is not on par when compared to the representation of men in government parliaments. A woman in parliament will be able to address women's issues, and then a woman will have greater voice in politics. Increase the focus on women's employment, address the barriers women face in accessing work, both physical or virtual, including public employment programs, and provide relevant vocational training and upskilling training, particularly the use of technology. To provide social protection measures that can enhance productivity and participation of poor women in the labor market. The Philippines ranked 17 among 156 countries in the Global Gender Gap Report of 2021 of the World Economic Forum, which is one notch from the previous year.
Thank you. Thank you, Aileen. We'll have to wrap.
So in conclusion, achieving gender equality in the entrepreneurship and the workplace in the Philippines and nations involves dismantling gender stereotypes that affect women. Women economic empowerment will build the future we deserve.
Thank you so much, Aileen. And I think those examples of very concrete on the ground activities to really address gender stereotypes with youth and education and business are inspiring for all of us. So thank you very much for those examples in the Philippines. I now would like to turn to Ms. Fadé Ogunro. Ms. Ogunro is the Global Campaign Board Chair for the Cherie Blair Foundation, but also the founder and CEO of Bookings Africa, which is an on-demand digital marketplace that seeks to make critically important improvements to working conditions across the continent. I'll let her explain the work that she's doing and also her experiences as an entrepreneur facing gender stereotypes. So we're very eager to hear your perspective, Fadé. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And thank you to all the organizers and all the distinguished panelists as well as guests. It's going to be a hard act to follow Aileen, Ulrika, Sarah, Rose, but I will try my best. Based on what we've heard so far, it's clear that women entrepreneurs are impacted by stereotypes. They're negatively impacted. And what I think we need to focus on is the fact that stereotypes start early. They shape a woman's journey to entrepreneurship and have a long-lasting impact on their aspirations, confidence, and behavior. My name is Fadé Ogunro. I'm an ambitious and incredibly visionary techpreneur, and I've dedicated my professional life to the pursuit of equality, opportunity, and prosperity across Africa. As Wendy mentioned, I am the Africa chairperson of the Cherie Blair Foundation, and I'm passionate about the digital economy in Africa. And I've got a platform called bookingsafrica.com. It is a gig economy, on-demand gig economy work marketplace, and it connects global clients to local African talent. And what I'm really focused on with this company is actually helping to close the disparity in gender pay. It's the same all over the world. We've got a lot of data that shows that nowhere in the world are men and women paid equally. However, with the amelioration of technology, perhaps we can aim to close that gap. So let's go back to what I stated about gender stereotypes starting off in the early part of a woman's journey. We've had, this month is International Women's Month. The concept of, I think it was Break the Bias, is International Women's Day theme. Now, in order to really break the bias, we've got to first of all break through cultural and traditional patriarchal views that are normally embedded in society, and they've shaped our thinking, shaped our views, beliefs, and dare I say, limited the mindset. I want to go into my personal experience. We've mentioned that it starts at a young age, and I have to give thanks to my mother, who's my role model, because she actually, bringing us up, I've got 4 siblings, she didn't discriminate between whether you're a boy or you're a girl. Everybody had the same tasks, whether you're cooking, whether you're gardening, whatever it may be, whatever subject you want to learn, there was never any bias. And I think that really, I was fortunate enough to grow up in such an environment where being a woman was celebrated, being adding value to any table was what was celebrated and encouraged. So I went into my worldview never started off thinking that I would be stereotyped against, or there would be a bias simply because of my gender. So I want to allow me to go into my personal experiences. When I lived in London, I'm sure you can tell from my English accent. I lived in London my whole life, and I moved to Nigeria about 10 years ago. And in that space of time is where I found that, yes, it is a misogynistic society, I must be honest. And it's it's a lot more blatant than any society that I've lived in, especially compared to the UK. I'm not saying it doesn't exist there, but it's a lot more in your face, and we're disproportionately affected in Africa. I would say starting off I was a freelance journalist in 2011 when I moved to Nigeria, and I had the boss try to negotiate my salary and make sexual advances at the same time. I'm sure if I was a man, I wouldn't experience that. So that was my first ever in your face, notwithstanding, and it was passed off as it was the norm. And that is when I really realized that, okay, I'm in a society where the gender bias is very, very apparent. And then let's go into starting my production company. After being a freelance journalist, I began to run my own production company with my older brother. And then I faced another level of bias because, yes, they would respect me. However, when it came to making the financial decisions, they wouldn't trust me. They would always say, we want to speak to the chairman, we want to speak to the boss, referring to my brother, who didn't even live in Nigeria, by the way. But some of the men at the table were willing to wait a month or so for my brother to come into Nigeria so they could negotiate money, because clearly as a woman, I have no financial literacy. That was their standpoint. So that was another layer of bias that I experienced running my own production company. Then I move into tech, which is where I am now, launching Bookings Africa. And there was another layer of bias there where it's a heavily male-dominated industry. Raising funds, I was only greeted by male VCs. And my peers, who were also entrepreneurs who were trying to raise money, I found majority of them, 99% of the time, it was a woman. So, I mean, it was a man, sorry. So I was surrounded by male entrepreneurs, surrounded by male VCs. So selling the value proposition for my tech company wasn't always the easiest. So pitching, running my own production company, being a freelance journalist, at these stages, I faced a blatant gender bias. Now, that's from someone who I'm exposed, lived abroad. Now, imagine people that don't even have the same experiences and is fortunate to have the same opportunities that I have. So what did I do? Yes, I am a solution provider. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to live in a society where misogyny is rife, I've got to look at the data, step back, look at the data, and then also, I love to make data-driven decisions, look at how I can ensure that my value is what speaks first and what the opposite sex notices beyond my female exterior. And that's one thing that I'm also fortunate that my parents were able to instill in me at very, very young. So I looked at what were the values that these men that are potentially creating a barrier, what are the values that they respect? And how can I position my narrative to offer this value? So I had to defy social expectations. I mentor a lot of young girls, and they always approach me saying that I'm so bold, I'm so confident. They're not used to women speaking up. Women are meant to be quiet, just seen and not heard. But the fact that I'm breaking that barrier, I'm defying social expectations. I've been struggled to be taken seriously. I come from a media background, and a lot of people in the tech space just kind of reduced me to a specific industry. You're only good enough to be a presenter. You're only good enough to be, a model. But the fact that I've run 3 successful businesses, there must be something that they don't understand. And the fact that I'm able to add value, then they actually want to listen to me. It's no longer a fluke. I actually must be doing something right, and they want to learn from that. So I always ensured that those value propositions were always highlighted. Accessing funds generally is a lot harder being a Nigerian woman. There are lots of laws that don't encourage that. So as an entrepreneur, we're always going to be, as a female entrepreneur, we're always going to be secondary. And then owning my accomplishments, which goes back to having a voice. I'm able to put out on social media, this is what I've achieved, this is what I'm planning on doing. So that, and not being afraid to stand up in a crowd where it's male dominated. A lot of us have probably been to offices where it's male dominated, and men don't even realize something as simple as they produce more testosterone, so they're actually going to naturally be warmer than women. So when women are saying it's a bit too cold, because in Nigeria we always have ACs on everywhere, air conditioning on, we might just say, oh, can you reduce the AC? Once again, the woman is nagging, we always have a problem. There's actually scientific proof behind it, but nobody actually wants to give that the time. They just want to reduce us to nagging women, and we're just not cooperative. So what I realized is
final comments, Fadé.
Oh wow, time has really flown. Okay, so final comments then would be, what can the international community do? What can be done to actually reduce gender bias? For me, it comes down to connectivity, affordability, and literacy. I think a lot of women lack access to mobile connectivity, affordability, as well as what Sweden are doing, the top-down approach from the government levels, and enforcing
Fadé, your audio seems to be cutting out.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I've rounded up now. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Fadé, thank you so much for those comments. I honestly hate to cut you short, because I could listen to forever to your comments about the actual lived experiences on the ground, which resonates so much, and I'm sure with so much of our audience. Let me though turn to our final speaker, Sophia Spreckman-Cinero, who's the Secretary General of CARE International, which I think needs no introduction. They've done amazing work all over the world on issues related to gender equality. And I will pass it over to her. Just one comment: if you do have questions, We'll have a little bit of time for questions at the end, so please post any questions in the chat and we'll pick them up and convey them to the speakers. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sophia.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you for inviting CARE to join this inspiring discussion. I'm really so inspired, and I'm honored to be here to discuss how to address inequalities in unpaid care work and the ways we can collectively build forward to achieve women's economic justice in a lasting and sustainable way. I actually like to start to express my gratitude and solidarity with the dedicated practitioners, many here today, as we just heard, who are continuing the fight for gender equality and women's rights during these very challenging times. I want to express solidarity in particular with women and girls around the world who are currently leading this work in the midst of multiple crises, be this as witnesses or first responders in conflict from Syria to Ethiopia, Afghanistan to Ukraine, or while leading response and recovery efforts to the COVID-19 pandemic. Crisis, and that includes the COVID pandemic, of course, disproportionately impact women and girls. This is particularly true for women and girls experiencing intersecting discrimination, such as those living in poverty, with disabilities, or from ethnic minority. Thank you for everything you do. We see you, we hear you. We are with you. At CARE, we work at the nexus of economic justice, humanitarian action, and sustainable development. We put gender equality at the heart of everything we do. For example, when the COVID pandemic started, CARE conducted rapid gender analysis in nearly 40 countries and spoke with more than 6,000 women. Over and over again, we heard from women losing their income and livelihoods overnight, often without legal or social protections. We've heard from women suffering the shadow pandemic of gender-based violence. And we've witnessed, as was referenced several times in this panel, how women and girls' unpaid care and domestic work skyrocketed. So how can we address inequity in unpaid care and how this impacts women's and economic justice and entrepreneurship? What issues are at play here? Let me start by sharing a few insights. Firstly, unpaid care work has increased during COVID, and with that, the barriers to women's economic justice have risen as well. I know many of you will be acutely aware of this fact, and I think many of us, maybe from our own personal experience, even pre-COVID, women and girls were performing 3 times as much unpaid care and domestic work than men and boys. Since the start of the pandemic, this amount has increased by another 2 to 3 hours per day, or in percentages, a further 30 to 40%. This is truly one of the biggest structural barriers to women's economic justice. It prevents women and girls from pursuing paid work or education, taking on political and workplace leadership. It limits their time for relaxation and poses negative impacts on their physical and mental health. CARE's programming on advancing women's economic empowerment in Vietnam shows that more than 20% of women did not take on any paid work because of the high amount of unpaid care and domestic work that they had to carry out. With COVID, higher shares of unpaid care work meant that women were the first to lose or give up their work. And caring for sick relatives meant that they were also exposed to higher infection risks. In the Latin American Caribbean region, for example, there was a mass exodus of women from the labor force due to higher job losses and or over having to attend care demands at home. Many children staying at home was also needing support for their education and homework, and much of that was taken on by women. So the rate of job market participation by women declined from 52% in 2019 to 46% in 2020. And the high amounts of unpaid care work also meant women were slower to return to search for employment. Second, Women are overly concentrated in precarious work sectors, which is another structural barrier. Examples are the informal sectors. For example, women working more as street vendors, working as garment or domestic workers. In Asia, for instance, 90% of women's employment is in the informal sector. Or as we have very eloquently actually heard today from many on this panel, entrepreneurship is also a precarious form of work due to the lack of access to social protection and benefits for women. So CARE's work with women entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka showed that in our programs, 90% of women entrepreneurs saw their income decrease and their supply chains disrupted. And without safety nets to mitigate the impact, then and the risk they're experiencing of extreme poverty, of course, increases. What women entrepreneurs and informal workers have in common is that they typically aren't covered by legal and social protections. When CARE, along with our partners in Colombia and Ecuador, conducted an assessment of the pandemic's impact on women domestic workers in those countries, the results were just staggering. Almost 50% of domestic workers in Latin America and the Caribbean lost their jobs overnight during the pandemic, and millions of them were sent on unpaid leave without any social benefits. I'm really dwelling on this point to show the many intertwining structural barriers that women face when realizing their economic rights as entrepreneurs, informal workers, or even as formal employees. Not only are women pushed out or kept out of paid work opportunities by high amounts of unpaid care work when they lose their jobs, because of the nature of work that women are concentrated in, they often lose their livelihoods at the same time and have no safety nets to mitigate the impact. And third, gender stereotypes, as we have heard, affect inequity in unpaid care, requiring a holistic approach to build a caring economy. Safety nets work for diverse groups of women. And as part of our programming at CARE, for example, in Vietnam and Honduras, which supports marginalized women workers and entrepreneurs, CARE takes a 3-degree approach, which includes support to caregivers, offering trainings, lead gender audits, and improve public services, while also and critically addressing gender discriminatory social norms by engaging men and boys and including them and working with men and boys on gender equality. So what are some of the solutions to these deep structural barriers? In a summary, and I'll be short, we need to build the care economy and ensure social protection schemes work, including for women entrepreneurs. We need a holistic, structural approach to building a caring economy, recognizing care as a right and addressing the 5 R's. The 5 R's, which are recognition of care work as productive, which adds value to the economy and society. A reduction of total hours that women and girls spend on unpaid services. We need redistribution at the household level. That is, that men and boys also take on this work through addressing gender discriminatory norms and shifting responsibility to governments and employers. We need representation, the 4th R, of the most marginalized and caregivers in decisions on design and care policies. And the 5th R is reward for care work via generating decent working conditions and equal pay for work of equal value to protect a workforce largely made up of women and generally building decent care jobs. We also need to provide 10% of national public budgets and increased amounts of official development assistance for care and social services such as health and education, and creating 80 million decent care jobs. Research shows that by building the care economy, the economic benefits of narrowing gender gaps are 6 to 8 times higher than the social spending required. And at the same time, we need to expand social protection schemes and safety nets to capture women working in the informal economy, women entrepreneurs and marginalized groups. And finally, and given that we are on the same panel, I'd like to briefly highlight the way CARE has been working with the government of Rwanda to jointly increase women's financial inclusion in the country. As Rose has highlighted, the government of Rwanda has really well-defined vision on financial inclusion and models into its financial sector development strategy, and as a key vehicle to help changing gender discriminatory norms and practices. CARE's financial inclusion work through VSLAs, Village Savings and Loans Associations, covers 30 districts and has supported women mobilizing around $25 million of savings per year and using $22 million as loans invested in their income generating activities. So thank you for inviting me to speak today and for your continued partnership in fostering gender equality and building a caring economy. Together, we can move forward into a more inclusive, sustainable, and prosperous future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for Sophia for those comments and for your passion on this and for raising the issues around care, which all of us have seen really in stark contrast right now with the COVID crisis. And we've seen how it's really affects people, women disproportionately. So thank you for those comments and the work on that. We have about 9 minutes left, and we have so many rich comments that we've heard and so many great recommendations. I thought what I would try to do is just go back to our speakers, and I will start with Sarah to just give your #1 takeaways on what the key things are that we can do to really eliminate gender stereotypes at the local level and at the global level. And if I can ask Sarah to start with those comments, and then if everybody could just take a half a minute or a minute to give your final perspective on the most important thing we can do and the people in this audience can do to eliminate, we'll have a very strong call to action. So let me kick that round off with Sarah and just ask that everybody try to be as succinct as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Oh, what a fantastic panel. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I'd just like to highlight, a few things of what we can do to tackle gender stereotypes. First, I think it's education, media, and general entrepreneurial ecosystem with all its institutions that form the space for business to operate. The general business environment, the entire ecosystem, we need to do something about that. And also, we can address gender stereotypes by showcasing and celebrating successful women and their work through media and other communications channels. I mean, some of the successful women have been part of this panel, and immediately they speak, you're like, oh, I want to get in touch with that one. I want to get in touch with that one. But if we were publishing this, these role models, if we were, writing books about them, producing films about them, it would help because, with the social media movement, and lots of our young girls and lots of our young entrepreneurs will have access to these role models. So we need to improve the visibility of some of this. And then the other important thing is data. I mean, without evidence, we might as well, waste time. So we really need to collect data. We need to make noise even at country level and say, all the data has to be gender disaggregated so that we know where we are being treated unfairly. I think those are the main points. Thank you.
Great, absolutely. And I'll turn now to Rose and get your #1 takeaway of what action should be the focus of our efforts.
Thank you so much, and much appreciation for the good presentations and also the contribution I saw in questions and contribution on the platform. One of my takeaway is, and I think it was said by one of the presenters, we don't give much attention to what we do ourselves. I think it was Sarah who said it. It is very important that we are very keen and very attentive of how ourselves we behave. We are claiming a lot and we want to do a lot, but how do we behave, not only as individuals, but as institutions? How your institution, how the institutions are behaving in terms of stereotyping, and how we do relate to the men and women we have around us, might be at the family level, individual level, but more importantly, at corporate level, how we behave. Second, we have a lot of institutions, we have mechanisms, and we have programs. And for Rwanda, that has been one of the key drive is accountability, because we commit and have been committing and committing. But what is happening when we commit? Somebody has to account. We commit a lot, but we do very little. And Sarah was again saying the progress is very slow because we don't account. I think we have to account for change, and it's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that ties nicely into the topic of data, and evidence, and what is actually happening on the ground. So Ulrika, I'll pass the mic to you to get your perspective on this.
Yes, hi, sorry. I'll be brief. I think social protection system, childcare, and the care economy that we took is a really prerequisite for any participation of women in the labor market and in enterprises. Secondly, data, I agree, facts to prove it. The third one, women as role models, but also women's networks to support each other and to really strengthen each other. And there, I mean, women's movements and women's organizations play a good role also, I think. And maybe fourthly, the potential of the green economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Aileen, can we get your thoughts on this?
Yes, I'll be brief as well. Education matters. Gender-responsive teaching and learning materials, including professional development for educators. This is urgent and very important. Teachers need to be supported to challenge gender stereotypes, to transform their classrooms into gender-sensitive learning environments. I also would like to say that role models is important for us to show and portray women in a positive light, as well in the media, social media, and traditional media. And as well as also the relevance for the unpaid work that women do at home, both in the virtual world, we are the workforce, or skill workers. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Aileen. And Fadé, your perspective.
Thank you. Everyone's made valid points. I'd like to focus on the gender digital divide that's prominent in lower income societies. So to tackle that, I believe connectivity, because there is still a lack of connectivity in rural areas that affects a lot of lower income women, affordability of devices and the data needed when you do have the connectivity, and then literacy, formal as well as digital literacy as well. And a fourth one in response to that would also be access to finance, because I do believe if we're more connected, we've got more affordable devices and data, and we're literate and we can partake more in the digital economy, then we'll also be able to automatically get more data, which is what overall we've all said that we need.
Thank you all so much. This has been really a stimulating discussion. I think I'll put my one additional thought in there. All of these are very, very high on my list. I would just add enlisting men and making sure men are part of the solution across all of these fronts is going to be extremely important to really getting us to full equality. So just to sum up what I'm hearing, education, media, communication, making sure we enlist businesses in this exercise, that we're showcasing successful women, we're using ourselves as role models and drawing on other role models and networks that are out there to promote women's leadership. data, evidence, and accountability. So making sure that we set goals and that we hold those institutions and individuals accountable for tearing down those, calling out the gender stereotypes and then tearing them down. The social protection and the care economy is essential for liberating women from the unequal care burden that they clearly are facing today. And digital technology, communications, and literacy. So all of those are incredible contributions. I think we have the start of a very, very powerful call to action with all of your comments. And I wanted to thank all of you on the panel for being here, and also thank the Cherie Blair Foundation and the governments of Rwanda, Sweden, and the Philippines for all of the work you've done to organize this effort. And we will very much look forward to continuing the conversation and continuing to work with all of you to break the bias. So thank you all very much. And we will look forward to that conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Salamat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank you all
everyone.
for the inspiration. Thank you.
Very inspiring. Thank you all.
Bye.